Okay, today we're going to do two operas. One, Le Nozze di Figaro, by Mozart, of course, and the other, Die Zauber Flote. The one is in Italian, the other is in German. Both have very complicated, unnecessarily complicated plots. And these are weaknesses of the dramas, respectively, but both have the greatest, or almost the greatest, music in opera imaginable. Because in the end, Mozart is the king of opera. Opera was the ideal vehicle for him. It conveyed more of his personality, more openly, more... that's hard to say, but opera, of course, has the advantage of visible spectacle, acting, plot, characters, singers who can show nuances by the human voice, so that the human voice becomes another instrument. So for most people, and I think in the end for everybody, opera was the ideal vehicle, the ideal form for Mozart. Okay. Then too, we've discussed a couple of things before. He had the partnership of a librettista, a man who wrote the libretto. Libretto simply means little book. In other words, the text, the script, the words. He had probably the greatest of all, Lorenzo da Ponte, a priest, an Italian priest, who was so witty and so brilliant. And as I mentioned before, after this, the date, by the way, for Le Nozze is 1786. Mozart died in 1791. After this time, things went badly for many people. Da Ponte went to the United States and became, I guess, the first professor of Italian literature at Columbia. Wow. And he lived a long time. Okay, but here we are. He's the librettista of the three greatest libretti, you know, this you have to say. Don Giovanni, greatest of all, in my opinion. Le Nozze, close second. And Così fan tutte, which is wonderful too. So that partnership is the most fruitful and the most wonderful in opera, most wonderful imaginable. But there are limitations. The plot of Le Nozze is severely limited, and I'll show you why. To try to tell the story in all of its intricacies, this author who wrote 100 Great Operas, Henry Simon, act-by-act synopses. I just had a quick look at him, at his account of these two. Act 4, which is very complex, as he says. To Act 4, he gives a little more than half a page. That's like saying, I give up. It's impossible. I don't even want to summarize it. But it's a real weakness of his book, too, because the music of Act 4 is possibly the greatest of all music, with Aida, I think. Don Giovanni, have to talk about Aida sometime, too. The music of Act 4 is the pinnacle. It couldn't be better. And he devotes 3/4 of one page, 2 paragraphs, to trying to summarize it. Sorry, that's bad. But I agree with him. It's so convoluted and so complex that it's very hard to tell. And I can't tell it in detail. So I won't even really try. Okay. The opera opens with a famous overture music, which is often a concert piece. Should be too. It's wonderful. Now, you should know two things. First of all, the play Le Nozze di Figaro is based on the French play Le Mariage de Figaro by Beaumarchais, Frenchman in Paris. He wrote some others too, some other dramas. He was not writing for opera, he was writing for the stage, just drama. He was very successful though. He was kind of an adventurer who took advantage of the mood in Paris, I think. After all, in 1786, we were 3 years away from the French Revolution. 1789, July 14th, one of the most important dates for students to remember. The mood was certainly anti-aristocracy, if not anti-king. Now, the anti-king, of course, no one would dare directly express, but anti-aristocracy, yes, many dared to express it. In fact, some aristocrats expressed it. So this play was a little bit inflammatory. And we know from Amadeus that the emperor didn't want to let Mozart put on this play. And other aristocrats in Vienna now, of course, didn't want him to do so either. He insisted that it wasn't political, but it, of course, it implicitly implied political. And Mozart was either naive or disingenuous, pretending not to understand. What is political? I don't think he was naive. So he knew what he was doing, but he had a text. For an opera composer, imagine the importance. It's like for an actor, famous actors complain all the time about being unable to find texts, find scripts. A famous American actor, say a Jack Nicholson or Tom Cruise, or you choose, Mel Gibson. Apparently they look for scripts all the time. Because why? Because they need to act. They need to make films to make a living, and it's what they do and what they probably love to do, and I'm sure they do. But the difficulty is to find a great script. The same it's always been. It's a perennial problem. So Mozart had to take what he could get. He and Ponte teamed up on this opera. Okay, 1786. Now, the other thing I have to tell you is, let's see now. Oh yeah, a famous opera about Figaro preceded this one. In this case, it followed this one. Here's the problem. 1786, The Marriage of Figaro. 1814, when? I'm not sure. 1814, I'm going to guess. Just Figaro, by Rossini, Gioacchino Rossini. Wonderful opera, still famous, and many Koreans have heard songs from it too. Okay, that's Rossini. But the action of Rossini's opera precedes the action of Mozart's. This is a problem, of course, by two different composers. In the preceding action, we get to know these main characters. Figaro, Suzanna, the future Count, Almaviva. No, we don't, excuse me, no, not Suzanna. Forget Suzanna. Figaro, the Count, the future Count, and the future Countess. But also Dr. Bartolo, and a couple of these other characters. Okay. Really, the story of Figaro is more amusing, more fun than the story of The Marriage of Figaro. But these two complications. Okay, let's begin. Beaumarchais wrote plays about both actions. Excuse me. Here we go. The opening. Dun 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 dun. No, let's see now. 5, 6, 7, 40. Blah 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 blah. At the very beginning, the curtain goes up after the overture music right away, and there is Figaro measuring his bedroom. Suzanna's there watching him, and they're a wonderful couple. Both very witty people, and that's part of the point. They are so witty, so charming, that they imply a statement against the aristocracy, just by their wit and charm. Why should there be an aristocracy? How can there be any aristocracy that doesn't include them? One might almost ask. Okay, measuring the bedroom and measuring the bed. Now, where is this bedroom? Adjoining a DJ, adjoining that of the bedroom of the Countess and the Count. How wonderful. The Countess and the Count have their big room, and their most important trusted servants, Suzanna for the Countess, Figaro for the Count, are right there so that the two aristocrats can call for their main servants at almost any time. And Suzanna begins to mock Figaro. Well, it's not. One realizes that it's not easy to mock a Figaro. Figaro is so sharp, but Suzanna is sharp too, and she can mock him. Really, it reminds one a lot of Penelope and Odysseus in Book 23, when she outsmarts Mr. Smart with the trick about the bed. Kind of similar, and here we have a bed too. Interesting. Da Ponte, who was certainly a literate priest, knew this too, and really his audience was quite literate too. That of Vienna, aristocrats, sharp people, used to high level of entertainment. Excuse me. Suzanna mocks Figaro. Now I better pick up the pace here because we're doing two. Okay. And she makes him realize that maybe the Count has reasons of his own for wanting to have the servants there. Maybe it's not Figaro he wants to have there. Maybe it's Suzanna he wants to have there. Figaro is no fool, and he's not tremendously shocked by this, but he realizes, of course, Suzanna must be right. And of course, he has been trying to seduce Suzanna. So, famous aria, Se vuol ballare, signor Contino, papa. If you want to dance, little Count, Figaro will outsmart you. And then it ends with this resounding ta-da! The game is on. But a game like this, okay, it is a game. It's a complex matter, but anyway. In this game, the Countess will be involved. Now, the relationship between the Count Almaviva and the Countess, the former Rosina of the earlier story, later opera, is complex too. The story of Figaro, just the opera about Figaro, was about the Count's winning her hand, and he loved her, and this even implies a whole attitude toward marriage that I suppose is implied even in the institution of marriage. That is, let's put it from a male point of view, men are hot, heated in courtship and wooing, but cool in the sequel as time goes by. Well, not much time has gone by, and the Count is already kind of cool, and is already looking around and trying to find other playthings, let's say. Terrible word about women. Okay, and Suzanna is so charming, so cute, so a superior plaything, let's say. Okay, so the game begins. Now, other characters enter. We have a series of hidings. That is, the Count comes to talk to Suzanna, but then the Count even has to hide. And then Carobino is a boy servant, but he's related to Rosina, so he is almost an aristocrat. And he is charming, but first of all, his role must be played by a woman because it's a soprano role. He is a boy, 16, 17, who has suddenly become very interested in women himself. So a little bit innocent, but only a little bit. And he comes in and out of things because he wouldn't. He even plays with his cousin, but that's play. But he's certainly interested in any other woman, including even the Countess. Whoa! Now, Rosina the Countess. She becomes the melancholy woman. She becomes the melancholy wife who realizes that her husband's affection has strayed. Would like to have it back. In the very sophisticated, very worldly atmosphere of Vienna, which very as sophisticated as Paris, much more than it's the capital. The capitals are worldly places. Capitals are where pleasures can be found, if one wants them, where money is, sophistication is, education is. All this is true of Seoul too, of course. That's Vienna. Very high level. So, in this melancholy view, let's put it this way. There was a sequel to The Marriage of Figaro a few years later. By that time, the Countess has already had an affair or two herself, and has even produced an illegitimate child. Well, these things will happen when the games are played, especially in an age that didn't have contraception, condoms, things like that. Okay, so that's the atmosphere, very sophisticated, but melancholy creeps in here. In a play like this, and in an atmosphere like that, melancholy, yes, but it's not jump off the balcony melancholy. It's just melancholy that love ends. Things change. Mutability rules human beings. And love either evolves or it changes. But it certainly cannot remain what it was at the beginning. Simply by dint of physical changes that the two bodies undergo. So the Countess is a melancholy creature, a little bit, but she's also joyful too. And the friendship that she has, the friendship between the Countess Rosina, who we must call her, that is, she was not originally an aristocrat, notice this, and Suzanna is wonderful, and that too implies a kind of undermining of the aristocratic view. That friendship is wonderful. She's always the boss. In the end, she's got to be the boss. But let's say she loves and I think respects Suzanna for her intelligence, for her heart, her wit, all this. Okay. Fortunately, I've spoken so much that I can take some shortcuts because it's so complicated. Among the complications, we learn that Figaro is really the son of Dr. Bartolo, of all people. That's impossible. And Marcellina, who is an aging woman who has been trying to seduce Figaro herself, or force Figaro to marry her. What a revelation. She's actually his mother. What? This kind of thing. This is the sort of nonsense that Mozart and Da Ponte were burdened with, that Beaumarchais threw into his play. By the way, his play was originally, I guess it was in prose. Maybe it was in prose. I'm not sure of that. Prose or verse makes some difference. Okay, shortcuts. Don Basilio, who is a lawyer, very sharp, a lawyer who protects the interests of the Count. Okay, I'm going to tell you about 3 very famous songs and sing a little bit rather than tell about the plot, which is tiresome. By the way, compared with it, the plot of Don Giovanni is much superior, much superior. It too is complicated, but much superior. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, and I'll say it again, the greatest operas, there are two greatest operas, and others, a couple of others come close. The two greatest are Don Giovanni and Aida. Marriage of Figaro comes close. Der Rosenkavalier, 20th century, Vienna also, Strauss, and a great librettist, in some ways the greatest, Hofmannsthal. Those two are right in second place, along maybe with Traviata, maybe Rigoletto. I think maybe Parsifal. The music is so wonderful of Wagner. But if you're interested in my opinion, these are at the peaks. These are on the mountains. Don Giovanni. If I had to choose one, it would have to be two. Don Giovanni and Aida. Okay. The Countess in Melancholy sings when she realizes that the Count has been chasing after Susanna. She learns about this from Susanna, and the delicacy, the tact of these two people is wonderful. And she sings, Porgi amor, porgi amor. I don't know too many of the words. Love, give me some remedy, because I love my husband, I love that man, but I'm sad because his affections are wandering. I can't do that one even. Voice not too good early in the morning, I guess. I can't do it. Okay, then Carobino's. Figaro sings about Carobino. Non più entrare farfallone amoroso. Koreans know this one, I think. Dun 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 dun. Delle belle turban di riposo, Narcisetta modino amor. Delle belle turban di riposo, Narcisetta adoncino d'amor. Okay. And the most famous, but the words are the silliest, goes to Carobino. Voi che sapete, dun 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 dun. Not doing a good job of this. Maybe we'll do it some other time when I have voice, and I'll try to recover some of the words. But there are many, many very excellent songs, and there are two great marches, three, that I know of in opera. One goes to Aida because the scale of the drama is so vast and wonderful. But the other two are respectively in Le Nozze and Don Giovanni, Mozart. Those little marches are immortal. They come. The one in this opera comes in the fourth act. I better get to the point before we run out of time here. In Act 4, a big celebration, fireworks, everything, and the Count hopes to meet Susanna in the garden, in trees there, in hiding, and at least set up a rendezvous for lovemaking. And the Countess and Susanna have set this up, so they're going to trap the Count and embarrass him a little bit, and hope that this corrects his ways. Figaro is part of this plot too, but the plot has a couple of things that Figaro even doesn't know, and Figaro is tricked briefly. The music of 4, especially late 4, that one section is the greatest of all opera music. That one section, the last 20 minutes, is the greatest of all music. But as a whole, I'll still take Don Giovanni and Aida. But those last 20 minutes, including the march, and including the final scene, Nothing can come close to that for just one section. Now this is the part that my author here, Mr. Simon, devoted half a page to. It's impossible to summarize he would need 4 pages to summarize the intricacies, and I agree with him. I can't do it. I would have to prepare for 2 hours just to tell you about that final act. And I don't have the 2 hours, unfortunately. Okay, but they're in the garden, it's night, we have the wonderful march scene, the celebrations, the secrecy, ducking in and out of the woods, and all that. And finally, in the finale, here we go, the Countess is dressed up like Suzanna, and she's there in the woods. So the Count is making love to her, meaning love me, I love you, and all that kind of stuff. But he's doing this to his own wife, not knowing it, of course. Susanna's in disguise too, and fools Figaro one time, but then Figaro sees through it, and that's wonderful too. This is rough. This is a little rough, but fortunately I don't remember details, so I probably will not break down. If I did, I would. But what happens is, the Count finally realizes, and everybody else does too, that he has been tricked. He has been tricked by Suzanna, and by the Countess, and by Figaro too. And he begs for forgiveness. I think the moment would be moving itself, but the music is unsurpassable. But unfortunately, I've got some things to say about this, which will save me too. And she says, "Adesso perdono, adesso perdono." Yeah, now I forgive. She forgives him. Now, in the movie Amadeus, this is arguably the high point, coinciding the opera and this. It's one of them anyway. And it's clear that the makers of Amadeus regard this the same way I do, the same way anybody does. Unsurpassable. But we get then the slow finale. The very moving forgiveness scene, which, as the movie says, implies universal forgiveness. It's so powerful. It's so powerful that it implies universal forgiveness. I agree. They're right. The makers of Amadeus are right about this. And it's so great in that movie, too, because it's Salieri, the kind of satanic Salieri, who perceives this. And in a sense, he's saved by it, too. Okay, but then we get a slow, and then we get Coriam. The tempo increases dramatically, and everybody on the stage, this is not moving, but the ideas are moving, I think, because Coriam tutti, and then this final, the words are very few. Coriam tutti. I've used this in my work, and I've analyzed it in my work, and I'm going to analyze it again, maybe in the work I'm now doing. Because this is absolute greatness. But there's a problem here. Coriam tutti means let's all run basically to the pleasures of life. Now, among the pleasures of life implied in an opera like this is the pursuit of women by men. And so there's a kind of reversal here. We get the moment of forgiveness, mercy, which is a very serious moment. This implies mercy. Okay, divine mercy, even, I agree. But then it's almost reversed in a hedonistic reversal which says, run after the pleasures of life, typical of Viennese, because this is Vienna. This is kind of the essence of Vienna. Vienna, big city, very sophisticated. Quick, while there's time, dum licet, carpe diem, snatch the hour, while time permits, pursue pleasure. Life is brief, pleasures fade, the body fades, we die. We're mortal. Mutability. These big, big themes, Roman themes, especially Roman themes. But in a Christian atmosphere, now that kind of captures the paradox that Vienna was, and that other places too. But Vienna, in the end, I think is a more religious place than Paris. That is, churches everywhere, profound Catholicism everywhere. Churches everywhere in Paris too, but no, I'm sorry. It's impossible to associate, I think, religion with Paris. It's not impossible to associate religion with Vienna. So, this opera, the ending, captures, in a sense, the essence of Vienna. Did Mozart know this? No. I don't believe it. That's going too far. Did Da Ponte know this? Maybe. But if you understand me, we get the profound forgiveness, God's forgiveness. We are forgiven, maybe. Universal mercy. But then reversed, but we are human, and we will pursue pleasures, and that's not going to change. We get then a kind of paradox. And the music and the action of the ending of the opera present that paradox. Again, I can't quite believe that Mozart understood all that at the time. I can almost believe that Da Ponte did, but didn't articulate it really. He didn't know he was speaking for a civilization. He was encapsulating a whole civilization when he did that, but he did, I think. It's an idea I just had now. But the ending is a little bit disturbing, looked at seriously, because the forgiveness scene is so serious, is so profound. And then it's as if Mozart and Da Ponte said, well, let's not get too serious. In the end, this is a comedy. But what that means is the seriousness of the moment is not entirely reversed. It's juxtaposed with hedonism. If this is true, there's hope for us all, of course. And it's an amazing statement. A great statement. Does it make sense? No. I don't think so. That kind of mercy, and then let's just turn around and be our silly selves, because that's what we are. Is that going to change? No. Are we going to be less silly? No. Can we be less silly? Seldom. A few superior saintly souls, yes, but on the whole, silly. Okay. Second opera, Die Zauberflöte. Here, Mozart's librettista was a friend of his, Schikaneder, who was kind of an adventurer who ran a popular theater, not the aristocratic theater for which Mozart usually wrote his operas, but the Schikaneder promised him a lot of money. Now, the opera was produced in the first production was in the final year of Mozart's life. See the wonderful movie, the immortal movie Amadeus. Memorize it. If you haven't memorized it, memorize that movie. That's good advice for any person who wants to absorb Western civilization a little bit. See that movie and memorize it. It's the easiest way to capture a lot. Okay, the plot is absurd. One has to forgive it. The music, wonderful. So Zauberflöte belongs in that second category. Notice that it's in German. Mozart wrote one excellent and one very good opera in German. The other was the first great one, excellent one he wrote, a pretty good one, Die Entführung aus dem Serail, the abduction from the Seraglio, from the harem. That was years earlier, though. Now he's at the end. And see, Amadeus, he was writing at the same time his own Requiem Mass at the same time. That can't praise that movie too much, in my opinion, but I think many people feel that way who have seen it. The music alone, immortal. Okay, here we go. Tamino. Tamino is a prince, but he's kind of lost in the woods. This Zauber Flote, the magic flute, is somewhat allegorical, but it's a confusion, and I've never gotten to the bottom of it, and I don't want to. The characters are mostly absurd. The plot is absurd. Nothing very memorable is happening here except the music. The overture, wonderful again. How that genius just poured out great music. I mean, it's a cliche, I guess. How he did this in 35 years, just poured out so much. It's a miracle. Okay, miracle is a word that one has to use a little cautiously, and I'd like to comment on that sometime, and comment on prayer, as I've said I would like to do, and some other values, and I'd like to give my view of what the place of these is then, if organized, articulate religions are undermined by absurdity. Then what is the value of prayer? One has to ask. Does it have any value at all, or is it simply caressing oneself? Okay, to our opera. Tamino is a prince. He is lost in the woods. A dragon attacks him. He is unconscious. Along come three beautiful ladies who kill the dragon. Not serious, all play. The mood of the whole film, of the whole opera, is play, and that's how Mozart is at his best. Mozart with a libretto, that would be interesting. Mozart with a Verdi libretto. Verdi should have written more comedy too. That would have brought out his genius, but Mozart never had a serious libretto. It would be interesting to imagine, but I think no, forget it. Forget it. Mozart was in Vienna. There was no place for a serious libretti in Vienna, and Mozart was in the perfect place for him. Zauberflöte. He sees the picture of a princess, Pamina. That's her name, right? I kind of mixed it up. Let me see. There's no, just a second. Magic. Just before, huh? Excuse me. Pamina. And he falls in love with her right away. But in order to win her, he must go through certain tests and ordeals. By the way, it's well known that Mozart was, at least for a while, a Mason, a Freemason. So was Goethe. It was very tempting to be a Freemason at that time. I have mentioned before that the 18th century was the low point of Christendom in the Western world. Lower even, I think, than the 20th century. Yep. Why? It was the age of reason and a lot of nonsense. The 20th century, of course, has its absolute nonsense. And so when the air clears, maybe there will be a similarity there. A time of religious low. Hard to find good things happening in 20th century religion, I think, anywhere. As far as that goes, then, that makes it a parallel for the 18th century. Now, I'm using all these historical terms, and I mock history and our supposed knowledge of history, so I'm using these generalizations, but as far as I can see, and that's okay. Okay, then we meet another main character, Papageno. Papageno is a bird catcher. He catches birds. He's uneducated, of course, and he wants to catch a papagena, female version of himself, marry and have lots of children. He represents common humanity. Tamino is the prince, Pamina is the princess. Now Pamina's mother is ironically kind of the villainess of this thing. She's the queen of the night. And she kind of is evil. What? It's all nonsense. It's really nonsense. And she sings a famous song, which I won't try to imitate, but it's all very silly. Anyway, the other main character is Sarastro. Sarastro. Sarastro, it runs a temple, the temple of wisdom, the temple of truth, deep in the woods. And the Queen of the Night hates him. Implied here is the Queen of the Night is maybe even the Catholic Church. And Sarastro is the Freemason with his temple of wisdom, which Mozart seems to take seriously. And in order to be a Freemason, one must go through an initiation and stages, much like the mystery religions of old. And in the end, one gets initiated and learns gradually from Sarastro about wisdom. So he is surrounded by these devoted followers. One of his servants, though, is Monostatos. Strange, allegorical maybe, but who cares? And he's a black man, but it turns out that he wants to seduce, maybe even rape, Pamina. And Pamina is kind of captured by him, and then Sarastro releases her, but then Tamino arrives, but he can't see her right away. He must fast, go without food, take a vow of silence for 3 days something, and comically, Papageno, who has become his kind of servant and friend, and their relationship is kind of nice, but it's all silly, must take the same vow of fasting and silence, but his reward will be Papagena, and he sees her, and she's beautiful and wonderful, and kind of looks like him, kind of like a bird catcher too. But he is incapable of fasting. He is incapable of silence. He's the common man. Now, of course, all of this is a little bit silly. In the end, Tamino passes the test, is united with Pamina, and mercifully, Papageno and Papagena are also united, and the music celebrates all of this. All of this implies, again, universal forgiveness, which I don't know much about the Freemasons, but I suspect that that's what they believe, and I respect that myself now. I've come to respect that because to imagine hell and heaven in my own mind has become simply too absurd. Sorry. God is up there keeping score, checking off good, bad, keeping a scorecard, and if the scorecard goes this way, then eternal bliss, and if it goes this way, eternal damnation, or with the Catholics something in between, the purgatory, in which a purgatorial state, let's say, in which we are cleansed to become worthy of eternal bliss. The whole thing is just too, frankly, too absurd. The scorecard. All of this is immensely flattering to believers, because what believer doesn't think that he is saved? And what believer isn't quite sure that those who don't share his belief are damned? The vanity and the silliness and the immorality of that system, the immorality of that hypocrisy is just too overwhelming. I mean, it's embarrassing. I think people who believe in heaven and hell should be embarrassed. But really, I think they are embarrassed. This is more disingenuity, because they know it's absurd. But they want to believe it because they claim to want to believe in morality. Oh my God. And this, I'm going to digress to Nietzsche here a little bit. Here's Nietzsche with his so well-known, partly, obscurely, theory of God is dead, therefore all is permitted. I take this to be fundamentally silly. I assume now Nietzsche is one of the sharpest people who have ever lived. Nietzsche, as a young man, before he went to this God is dead crap, there is no person who could have been more intelligent than Nietzsche. I believe that. But then he fell into this stuff. The Superman, the Übermensch, who is not really, who is superior because he can accept the fact that God is dead. He can accept the worst truths. God is dead, and der ewige Wiederkehr, eternal recurrence, that is, this life is being lived not just once, but over and over again for eternity. Now, Nietzsche dramatized himself. He felt immense self-pity as his health, I really don't blame him, I would too, as his health declined, as he wrote furiously. He must have written every day, just at a furious pace. He probably sensed that he was going insane, but to imagine that he went insane because God is dead is absurd. He would laugh. The younger Nietzsche would laugh, would be very amused at such a thought. I think the younger Nietzsche would say the following, and he's one of my heroes, the younger Nietzsche of Menschliches, Allzu Menschliches, which is an important book for me. Human, all too human. The younger man would say, of course there is no God. Not like the popular imagination imagines such a God to be anyway. And Nietzsche's father, who died when he was 3, was a Lutheran pastor, but this had little effect on him. But all this began with the following assumption: if God is dead, then we will go crazy. We will start killing each other and just doing whatever we feel like doing in despair, and we'll have these immense wars, and we'll have these immense cataclysms, all this because God is dead. Nonsense. I agree with Hume. Morality does not exist because of God. People feel they need God to assure some kind of obscure moral values, like some 10 Commandment, as if it took God to come up with the idea of thou shalt not kill or commit adultery, this mainly to protect the institution of marriage, this mainly to protect the very important institution of raising children. No, morality does not require God. In fact, it never has. I don't think it ever has, and it never will. Morality is a practical affair, as Hume says, and God or no God, we need morality to assure the possibility of society. No morality, no society. Then we really have chaos, and then we will really kill each other. But we're incapable of that. Let's move back to the beginning. We are practical people, mostly. Man is a practical animal, as he has to be. Morality is a result of that practicality. Religion is an attempt to put a divine sanction on those values, but really religion has done many other things, human sacrifice and other nonsensical things, like the scene. There's no reason to rehearse the absurd things we do because we're human, and the absurd things that we claim to believe. But in my opinion, when Nietzsche said that soon we will realize that God is dead, that we have killed God, which implies that maybe a God exists, and I think Nietzsche would accept that too, but utterly unknowable and organized religions, just like I say, are full of absurdities. We know that. So let's not get into that. But I'm glad I got onto that subject, this God is dead theme. Poor Nietzsche, dramatizing himself, desperately lonely, desperate for fame, desperate to achieve greatness, wanting to be remembered, wanting love and respect, and I think what happened was his mind was so active, so powerful, so penetrating. He said so many intelligent things during those early times, but he realized he doesn't have a coherent view that is associated with his name. And so in Zarathustra, which is claimed to be his masterpiece, I haven't read it all. I don't think I would regard it as such. Then he starts to come up with a number of ideas that are unfortunately associated with his name. Superman and God is Dead. The great Nietzsche is the earlier Nietzsche, who is a mine of insight and intelligence, which is unfortunately associated with, I think, silly ideas and untenable, indefensible, which the younger Nietzsche would have laughed at. The younger Nietzsche, I hope this is never said of me, but maybe, the older cook laughs at the younger cook. I don't think the younger cook could laugh at the older cook, I don't know. But the younger Nietzsche would certainly have laughed scornfully, disdainfully at the older Nietzsche and these conclusions, because the younger Nietzsche knew that all conclusions are nonsense, are just silly nonsense, self-deception. Okay, sorry, I'm getting on that theme again, but how did that get into Zauber Flote? Again, I think I've said all I have to say about it. What songs? Oh boy. A lot of nice music. Now, one difference is that, one formal difference that I'd like to tell you about, that's worthy of mention. The other operas, Don Giovanni, Le Nozze, Così, all the earlier operas are full of recitativo, and aria. Recitativo, aria. Recitativo is talking, conversation, but they converse in music, as in traditional opera. Aria is the set song, whether a solo or a duet or a trio or a quartet or a quintet, blah, blah, blah. Now, in Zauberflöte, we have talking, not recitativo, talking and then singing, talking and then singing. One must admit that one prefers the recitativo. Any lover of opera, although recitativo can be silly and boring, it's better than talking. In the world of opera, it's better than talking. It's a formal device, and everybody realizes that okay, let's call it a necessary evil, even recitativo. But to do without it, to eliminate it, is to take a big step, and no one wants that. It would be a little bit like eliminating the choruses from Greek dramas, and the choruses became smaller and smaller, and less relevant to Greek drama. Similarly, recitativo becomes less and less frequent, and opera suffers from it, I think. Wagner's solution was kind of to make everything recitativo, that is, non-stop music, but no stop aria time, stop duet time, stop quartet time. No stop, non-stop. And in a sense, he creates non-stop recitativo. Okay, that's one solution, and he did it pretty well. But this is a problem with Zauberflöte. No recitativo. Charming characters, charming music, stupid plot, utterly forgettable plot. Once again, Don Giovanni is the superior Mozart opera, I would say. And maybe tomorrow we'll do Aida. We've done Don Giovanni in the past. Now we've done these two other great Mozart operas. And so maybe tomorrow we'll do Aida, wonderful Aida. And I'll try to tell you why I think it is at the top of the world, along with Don Giovanni. Okay, thank you.